Family finally found Book 1, After the Dust Settles, Chapter 4, The Fine Print. As Maddie wrangled 3 energetic boys into her Subaru after breakfast, Tom pulled in front of the police station, since one of the town's 2 police cars had been, involved in an unfortunate accident. He figured he'd use his truck for official police business for now. Wade was already at the station when Tom walked in. At first sight of the sheriff, the deputy jumped out of his chair and hurried over.
"Am I glad to see you?"
Wade said, noticeable sweat on his brow.
"Those government people have been all over our files, and asking questions about those other boys. Don't worry, I didn't tell them anything. Mostly because I don't know anything, but even if I did, I wouldn't have..."
He paused, body tense in excitement.
"So, how are you keeping them? Do they have powers like Sonic? What are their names?"
Tom held up a hand.
Wade, slow down, Wade.
The deputy nodded, taking a few deep breaths.
"Yeah, okay, right."
Let's take this one step back, Tom.
The sheriff said, moving to his desk.
Those agents have been in our files.
Wade nodded.
"They wouldn't tell me what they were looking for, something about classified information.
He gave a quick laugh.
Like in those movies where the government is trying to hide something, right?"
Tom was less amused.
Right, did they take anything?
"No."
All right, I guess that much is good.
Tom paused.
They were asking about the boys.
"Yeah, mostly about what type of powers they had and if I had any interaction with them. I gave them my best poker face and said I didn't know anything."
Tom rolled his eyes.
Your poker face pretty bad, but considering you actually don't know anything about them, I guess it all worked out.
"Right."
The deputy did a quick look around and moved closer to Tom.
"So, are you keeping them?"
He gave Wade a slightly annoyed look.
They're not stray dogs, dude. It's up to them if they want to stay.
"Oh, right, right. Think they will."
He paused. Tom sighed, rubbing a hand across the back of his neck.
I don't know, so new. They're still pretty unsure about things. Hasn't even been a full day since the Robotech fight.
"Well, Sonic seemed to settle in pretty well after the first fight on Main Street."
Sonic really lived on Earth and was familiar with all of us.
Tom corrected.
Tails and Knuckles weren't, and they were their childhood traumas, which could complicate things.
"Knuckles."
Tom paused. Wade whispered, before turning back to Tom.
"That's the red one. He's the guy who was after Sonic and the little fox kid."
Tom nodded.
Robotech tricked him into helping, but he realized his mistake and helped take the nutbog down. He seemed pretty...
He searched for the right word.
well behaved since he's been with us. Like a good kid, just trusted the wrong person.
"Like Anna did in Frozen."
Wade's face twisted in anger.
"That Hans, what a jerk."
Wade, focus, buddy.
The deputy blinked and gave Tom an embarrassed smile.
"Sorry, so what about the fox?"
Tails is super smart, but he's been rejected a lot in his life. I think he's been alone for most of it.
"Like Sonic?"
Sort of, but I also get the feeling he was bullied too because he was different. Sonic didn't have that just isolation.
Tom furrowed his brow. Saying it like that made it seem as though 10 years of isolation was a big deal, like it didn't have a lasting, painful impact on the boy, who even now had his moments of panic if Tom or Maddie left without letting him know. Tails feared rejection. Sonic feared abandonment, 2 sides of the same coin.
"Tom."
He blinked, and this time the embarrassed smile was on his lips.
Sorry, lay down. I got lost in my thoughts for a minute.
Wade gave him a smile and dismissive hand wave.
"Hey, no problem, Sheriff. I get it. You've got 2 more kids to think about now. It's a big change. I don't blame you for being worried about him."
Tom shook his head.
I'm not worried.
I probably should stop talking about it anyway.
The deputy said, glancing toward the station door.
Those government guys are still wandering around. Don't want them to over anything they shouldn't write.
The sheriff turned to look toward the door. People in black uniforms wandered about outside, occasionally picking up and bagging something from the ground. Evidence, no doubt, but what kind? And what would they do with it once they had it back at their super-secret government hideout? Tom closed his eyes, giving his head a quick shake. No sense wondering or worrying about those kind of things. He wasn't exactly in any position to demand answers. Now was he? For 8 months he had hidden an alien boy in his attic, lying to the government of his whereabouts. And now there were 2 more aliens currently under his care, tentatively. Which reminded him.
Oh, down the fort.
He said, clipping a walkie to his shoulder.
I've got to see men about house.
Just the men I wanted to see.
Commander Walters said as Tom approached him in front of the mean bean. The place had been taped off as the military combed through the computers inside to get more information on Robotnik's past activities.
Feelings mutual.
The sheriff said, hooking his thumbs in his front pockets.
I have a favor to ask.
The commander signaled a female soldier, who nodded and hurried away.
I have that paperwork ready for you and your wife to sign.
Tom raised an eyebrow.
That was fast.
Walters gave him a stiff smile.
This isn't our first rodeo, Sheriff.
You mean you've angled with aliens before?
I'm afraid that's classified.
The soldier reappeared carrying a large envelope. Walters took it and handed it to Tom.
All the places you need to sign, check, or initial are marked. Fill it out and return it to me ASAP. I'd very much like to get this part of my mission finalized so I can concentrate on other matters, but...
Tom looked at the packet in his hands, an eyebrow raised. He had come home with more paperwork when he bought his last truck.
I'm surprised there's not more account supplies I could let a lawyer look it over.
The military man gave him a thin-lipped smile.
The government does not officially comment, confirm, or comment any speculation on alien existence. Telling you may find would not have any current law or precedent to compare the terms to.
Well, that sounds ominous.
Walters shook his head.
All the paperwork says is you or wife will assume responsibility for the aliens, keeping them safe and out of trouble until the government deems their abilities necessary for country or planetary protection.
Tom blinked.
Come on!
Those are very new aliens, Sir Wachowski. Very new powers, as we've seen with Robotnik. They have proven very useful in dealing with threats the military can't.
So you think you'll just call them into the fight and you see fit?
If the situation calls for it, then yes.
They're just kids. Can't just draft them into service when it suits you.
They're aliens, sir. Not exactly covered under our Constitution.
Tom gaped at the man.
You can seriously think we'll be fine with that? We're wondering every day if you'll be knocking at the door to send the kids, Commander. The fight never already started in Lord.
Commander Walters gave the man a hard stare.
To be frank, Sheriff, the United States government doesn't have to leave these aliens in your care at all. They're only doing so as a means of keeping them contained and hopefully prevent them from becoming threats themselves.
The sheriff said nothing. How do you respond to someone who clearly only sees the boys as aliens or potential super soldiers to be sent to fight a battle they may have no stakes in? The commander softened at Tom's horrified expression and pulled the man to a quieter spot tucked out of the way of the busy throng of military soldiers. After a quick look to assure they were not being observed, he spoke quietly.
Look, this is off the record. The Robotnik had ties to things that go deeper than anyone could have imagined. No idea what he was doing in that fight. What dangers there may still be. I'm hoping we'll need to call those boys in to deal with it. But frankly, they may be the only ones who can.
You called them boys that time, not aliens.
Tom said, his brow furrowed. What was this man playing at?
There are some in my own unit I don't trust completely.
The older man said, glancing around.
I need to play everything by the book to keep the jackals from nipping at my heels. I've been doing this a long time, but I know when to stick to the playbook, and when to throw a few curves.
He looked back at Tom.
I have grandkids about their age, so I completely understand your reservations, but I give you my word they will only be called if we have exhausted all other options.
Tom shook his head.
Why should I believe you?
The commander locked eyes with him.
Because right now I'm the only one keeping, shall we say, more ambitious people above me from swooping in and just carting those boys off to some secret government lab for testing.
Tom looked away as he considered this. If movies could be believed, the government wouldn't treat aliens very nicely, especially ones with such impressive powers as the boys. Walters had pretty much confirmed those suspicions, but Tom was usually a pretty good judge of character, and right now his cop sense wasn't going off much. There was still something the commander wasn't telling him, but his claim of wanting to protect the boys from others who may not be as sentimental toward them seemed sincere.
Just sign the paperwork. There are honestly only a handful of people who even know about that contract. Let alone what the details are. It'll be my decision to call the boys in necessary, and I will do everything in my power to avoid it as long as possible.
The sheriff offered him a questioning look.
If that's the case, why a contract out?
Walters smiled.
Because government bureaucracy needs to have their boxes checked. I can't offer financial assistance for the care of those boys unless the bean counters have that contract paperwork required away somewhere. They don't care what's on it. Just that it says government will pay somewhere in the legals.
That reminds me, I suffered a bit of intentional demotion when Robodac arrived the other night. I was wondering if...
I'll get a team over first thing tomorrow morning to get you patched up.
Walters said, holding up a hand.
Consider it a government apology for tasering Sonic, but I'll need that paperwork signed before I can offer any other assistance.
Tom looked down at the packet in his hands. This seemed wrong somehow, but what other choice did he have? Now that the government knew about all three boys, and that he and Maddie had cared for Sonic over the past 8 months, he felt his relative anonymity vanish. He was just some sheriff in a little town in Montana anymore. Now he was all-in dad, or guardian at least. So long as those boys were on Earth, the government would always have an eye on them. Walters may have started out as a cold, hard-nosed jerk, but Tom had to admit he seemed to want to try and protect them all, at least as much as he could.
All right,
He said, and Walters gave a relieved sigh.
I looked this over and maybe tonight, Tim, we'll get it back to you as soon as we can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Walters turned to walk away, before stopping.
Did you ever try the never-ending pasta bowl at Olive Garden?
Tom smiled.
Amazing.
I know, right? Endable.
Commander Walters and returned to the flow of activity moving outside the mean bean. Tom looked at the packet again, and uttered a sigh. Maddie wasn't going to like this, at all. The rest of the day passed as relatively normally as could be hoped. Tom and Wade helped direct traffic around the run main street, and met with the owners of all the damaged businesses along it. Tom had worried that yet another showdown would have turned some opinions against Sonic, but nearly everyone was understanding and forgiving. Not his fault some crazy guy wouldn't let things go. Sonic stepped up, protected his town. You've got a good kid, Sheriff. Yoon had promised to get assistance and to clean up the mess, but the citizens of Green Hills were understandably suspicious of the government agents. They refused to answer any questions regarding Sonic. The only consistent response the agents received regarding the hedgehog was that he was Tom and Maddie's boy. Polite kid, always eager to lend a helping hand. Great smile. to be a little hyper and talk your ear off, but a good kid. Tom had to take a minute to compose himself in the early afternoon. He knew his town was a friendly place, where people stepped up to help each other, but he didn't realize just how much they had accepted Sonic into their fold until now. Even though the hedgehog was his boy, it would seem the entire town had taken it upon themselves to protect him. It really did warm Tom's heart. 5 o'clock neared as Tom finished another stack of paperwork. This was almost the most annoying thing about these events. There was always a ton of paperwork to fill out, and it had to be done with some finesse, claiming the town had been damaged when a blue hedgehog, red echidna, and golden fox with two tails had used their superpowers to take down a madman who utilized a maggot gem to build a Gent robot would no doubt raise some eyebrows and get the wrong kind of attention. So a localized tornado had suddenly appeared out of the blue and torn up Main Street, twice, in the span of about 9 months, right? Tom ran a hand over his face. If anyone decided to do some real digging, this wouldn't hold up, but considering Green Hills was fairly isolated, and a small town to begin with, he hoped it would simply fall under the radar of any of those so-called mystery seekers. Besides, weird weather happened all the time, right? The sheriff signed the bottom of the last form and slapped it into his out-of-sight, out-of-mind bin to be filed later. His shoulders ached. He'd never been so happy to see quitting time roll near. His phone vibrated on the corner of his desk, and he heaved a sigh as he reached for it. Many people in town had his personal number, and he had been on it more today than he had in the past month. A smile passed over his lips when he flipped it over and saw his wife's icon making a goofy face back at him. That picture never failed to perk his mood. He thumbed the green icon.
Hello, Maddie. Did you have a good day?
It went pretty well, if I do say so myself.
She said, and it sounded like she was in the car.
I've got the cryptid crew in the back, and we were heading out to pick up some McDonald's.
Oh, really now?
Yep, I figure we'll get a quick supper and then head to Sam's for some supplies.
Supplies.
I am not sleeping outside again tonight.
She said, and he could picture her shaking her head with that stubborn look she gets sometimes.
And Tails and Knuckles need beds, and toothbrushes, and a few other things that I thought about earlier today but don't remember what they are because I foolishly thought I'd remember without writing them down.
I thought the camp out was pretty fun.
He said, leaning back in his chair and balancing a pen across 2 fingers.
Under the stars, cozied up in the tent.
Then you can sleep out there again, while I snuggle up with the boys in my nice comfy bed.
He laughed.
All right, I give.
Where is Sheriff Tom?
A deep voice said.
I hear him but do not see him.
He's on the phone?
Sonic said.
I don't, Lord.
Hey, Sonic, everything all right in clinic?
Oh, absolutely. I got the blood work done, no sweet.
Phone.
Knuckles asked.
It's a communication device.
Tails said.
That little rectangle Miss Maddie used to take our picture with earlier.
That's right.
Maddie said.
It connects to my car so I can talk without holding it. It's safer that way.
Bravo.
The Echidna said.
An efficient method for surveillance or to coordinate an attack.
Tom rolled his eyes with a smile.
Not everything about fighting Nooks.
One can never be too careful. Sheriff Tom, enemies could be anywhere.
I'll keep that in mind.
Anyway.
Maddie said, obviously trying to wrestle the conversation back on track.
I'm pulling into McDonald's now. Do you want to meet at that little park near the antique store to eat?
Sure, we'll be heading out if you...
Okay, see you soon. Love you.
Love you, too.
Tom hung up, a smile on his face. Standing, he leaned back to give his spine a stretch.
Well, what do you think? We've done our policing for today.
He said, unhooking his walkie and tucking it back in his drawer. The deputy gave a yawn as nodded.
Lots of stuff going on right now.
The sheriff loosened his top button as he headed out toward his truck.
Yeah, but I've settled down, and get some rest. I've got to head out and meet up with the family.
He threw away a wave and slid into his truck before a thought struck him, and he sat stunned for a moment. The word was out of Tom's mouth before he even registered it. Family, not the others, not Maddie and the boys. Family. It had simply slipped out, but it had felt right. Seemed he was accepting Tails and Knuckles a lot faster than he anticipated. Not that he disliked the boys. They were just knew he was as unsure about them as they were about him and Maddie, or at least, he thought he was. The thing is, now that he thought about it, they reminded him so much of Sonic during that road trip over 8 months ago. That crazy, death-defying, what am I doing? Road trip to San Francisco. Sonic had seemed confident, too sure of himself, until those great moments, in the bar while making his bucket list, in the hotel room, on the roof. In those moments, Tom saw him for the young, scared, lost kid he really was. And that's really what Tails and Knuckles were, kids. Kids who had been given a rough hand in life, and done their best to deal with it. Knuckles lost his entire family and had been on his own for a long time. All he knew was survival. Tails had been rejected by everyone, and now simply expected it as his life. All he knew was loneliness. For as amazing and powerful as these kids were, they were still only kids who had never been given the chance to behave as such. As crazy, and overwhelming, and stressful as accepting responsibility for these two seemed, maybe they were right where they needed to be. Tom shook his head as he started the truck. He didn't necessarily believe in fate, but having not one, not two, but 3 super-powered alien boys, each with similar childhood trauma, drop into his lap, into his family, seemed more than just coincidence. He glanced to his right. The packet Walters had given him lay in the passenger seat. His urge to keep the boys safe warred with his want to keep them out of the government's reach. One didn't seem to be possible without the other. Sighing, Tom pulled out. He pushed all these deep thoughts away. Nothing was going to be done right now, so no sense spending too much time thinking about it. Time was wassing, and he had a dinner date with his family.
You really did the blood work.
Tom asked, watching the boys goof around on the nearby playground. They had finished eating and let the boys blow off some energy before heading to the store. Maddie nodded.
There was a bit of a hiccup earlier in the day, but right before we left, he came back and wanted to try again. Tails and Knuckles distracted him, and that was all he needed.
Oh, really?
He did really well, they all did.
She looked over at the boys.
Look at them, just playing like kids.
And they were. The playground had a tall tower on one side, accessible only by a single ladder on the outside. Sonic had apparently assumed control of this tower as the king. Tails and Knuckles were currently scaling the tower to try and dethrone the hedgehog, who was throwing bits of mulch in defense. Tails landed on the peaked roof, and lowered his head to peer into the little room at the top. Sonic yelled something that sounded like,
Your sneak attack shall not succeed.
and tossed a handful of mulch at the fox boy, and Tails pulled back, laughing. The Echidna, meanwhile, had climbed the tower on the opposite side of the ladder, and finally managed to enter the top, after a quick scuffle, in which Sonic spouted things such as,
Verily you are a worthy opponent.
and
Your strength rivals my own.
Knuckles swept the hedgehog off his feet, and hung him over the railing by his ankles. Tom felt a momentary sliver of fear as Knuckles dangled the blue boy what must have been 12 feet off the ground. The Echidna had tried to kill Sonic not 2 days before, after all, but it passed quickly when he noticed both boys were laughing.
Evil hedgehog has been vanquished.
The Echidna bellowed, his deep baritone echoing across the playground.
His reign of tower has ended at long last. Long live the Echidna warrior.
Hurry for the hero!
Tails cheered, hovering over the other two.
The kingdom of Parklandia is free once more.
Your sneak attack was very effective, you and Fox.
Knuckles said, giving Sonic a
Oh, cruel fate.
Sonic lamented, throwing a hand against his forehead dramatically.
I am unknown.
You never know, they faced down a giant robot bent on killing them just yesterday.
Tom said, shaking his head.
Look how happy they are.
They need this.
Maddie said, looking back at her husband.
They all just need to be kids.
That's very true.
Tom's brow furrowed as his mind wandered back to the packet on his passenger seat. Maddie cocked an eyebrow at him.
Something wrong.
He blinked, offering her a smile.
Just thinking about something. I'll tell you later.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
She said, straightening up.
Later.
Okay, but you know it's just gonna bug me all night.
She turned toward the boys.
About time to wrap it up, guys. We've gotta get to the store.
A chorus of groans floated their way, and Knuckles gave Sonic a flip to catch him under the arms. The Echidna looked over toward the park bench.
And the emerald.
He asked, brows furrowed. Maddie held the bag up. He had been hesitant to leave it, but it swung awkwardly as he tried to climb on the playset.
Safe and sound.
He visibly relaxed at the sight of the bag.
5 more minutes.
The hedgehog begged.
Come on, we were good at the clinic.
Maddie smiled.
10 more minutes, only because you were very good today.
The chorus sent up a cheer as Knuckles gently dropped Sonic to the ground. The Echidna was now the king of the tower, and Sonic and Tails tried valiantly to overthrow him. They did not succeed. Sonic trailed behind Tom, the pair wandering the bakery section of Sam's Club. All in all, today had been, and were a lot of emotions. That knot that had appeared in his chest when they walked into the clinic this morning was still there, pushing itself against his ribs. It would lessen sometimes, but never seemed to go away entirely.
Something on your mind, buddy.
Tom asked as they checked out some donuts.
You're uncharacteristic quite tonight.
The hedgehog forced a smile in place.
Nah, just a bit tired, I guess.
The man cast him a sideways glance.
And it has nothing to do with your friends.
Sonic pulled his lips tight. Did it? Sure, the only reason they were here right now is because they had to buy Tails and Knuckles some stuff for home. 2 new beds will be coming with them, going right up into the attic. His attic, his personal, private space that won't be so private anymore, and won't be so his anymore. He glanced around. Maddie had taken the other boys to the clothing section to pick them up some new socks. They were nowhere to be seen. He turned back to Tom.
Do you think they'll stay?
Tom raised an eyebrow.
I thought you wanted them to stay. You really went all zappy at the Jimmy's place when you thought they would leave. Did you change your mind?
The hedgehog shook his head.
No, it's not that. It's just...
The hedgehog shook his head.
I guess I just didn't think about where they would sleep.
Yep, there are a lot of little details when you invite someone to live with you.
Tom said, picking up a box of donuts.
A lot more when you invite too.
Sonic flattened his ears. Was Tom mad? The beds had been a lot of money, even if Knuckles only seemed to want a mattress. Add a nightstand for Tails, a lamp, some bedding, socks, toothbrushes, and the various other little accessories needed for daily life, and this bill was adding up to be a pretty big chunk of change. Was this too much to ask of Tom and Maddie? They had taken him in, sure, but it had been their idea, and they had all gone through something together, a life-or-death bonding experience, as it were, so there was a connection. The couple hardly knew Tails and Knuckles, yet Sonic had practically forced them into taking his friends in. But, by the same token, Sonic had gone through a life-or-death bonding experience with Tails and Knuckles, too, that formed a connection between the 3 of them, reinforced by their play. He felt like a hedgehog pulled in 2. His first bond was to Tom and Maddie. The people who had saved him, taken him and given him a home and a family, cared for him, loved him, almost gave their lives for him. They were his best friends. Something poked at him about that, a thought that stayed hidden, but poked nonetheless. He ignored it. His other bond was with Tails and Knuckles, the two boys who shared much in common with him, and had risked their lives to help him take down Robotnik. They were the only ones who could possibly understand what he had gone through in his life, growing up alone, no family, no friends, different from all others on this world, incredible powers, but painful childhoods, alone, lost. He was the common thread between the two groups, but was that enough to bring them together, enough to make all this work, and did he want it to? Maybe the knot in his chest was a warning. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Maybe this whole situation was a huge mistake that would end up causing a lot of hurt feelings, frustration, and simmering anger, all because of his knee-jerk they have to stay, everyone else's wishes be darn it reaction.
Sonic.
A voice called, breaking Sonic out of this depressive thought spiral. Tom crouched down to face him, placing a hand on his shoulder.
What's with the face? Are you alright?
Sonic looked into Tom's eyes. He didn't think he saw any anger in them, but the hedgehog looked away just the same.
It's just a lot.
The man let out a short laugh. Then,
But he thought the same thing.
he gave Sonic's shoulder a squeeze.
Things are changing very fast. It can be scary. Yeah, there are a lot of question marks right now, a lot of things up in the air, but we're Wachowskis. We get through it together.
Another squeeze.
Because that's what a family does.
The boy stared at the man, letting what he had said seep in. Change is scary. We're Wachowskis, family. That hidden vote poke him again.
There they are.
Maddie said, snapping Sonic out of his thoughts.
There they are.
She pushed the cart, filled to the brim with snacks, books, clothes, and bedding. Knuckles walked next to her, a hand on the emerald in the bag. Tails held onto the front of the cart, riding it with a wide smile.
Well, I think we have enough to get us through tonight,
she said, pulling the cart to a stop.
They've got the new television, bed, mattresses, and nightstand ready to pick up round back. Let's head to the checkout.
I'm ready to hear my credit card begging for mercy.
Tom said, adding the box of donuts to the top of the cart. A thought seemed to occur to him.
I didn't even ask, but do we need some sort of booster seats for cars?
Sonic looked at him in absolute horror.
No, absolutely not.
Now, Sonic, you should have had one ready.
Tom looked down.
Actually, I'm with Sonic.
Maddie said, and Tom gave her a look.
I'm serious. According to the X-rays, their bones are all pretty solid, and their muscles are shockingly dense. That's why they can endure so much in fights and not really get hurt. I mean, come on, we saw what happened during that battle and none of them really had more than some bruising. Human would have broken just about everything.
Tom pointed to Sonic.
He was pretty banged up when we found him.
He also fell off a bridge, but again, nothing was broken, just bruised.
She pointed at Knuckles.
He was full-on hit by a car and just had the wind knocked out of him.
The Echidna pushed out his chest and gave the man a short nod.
But Maddie.
She held up a hand.
In any other situation, I'd be agreeing with you.
She shrugged.
But they aren't human children. They are tough little buggers, and as long as they wear their seatbelts, I'm comfortable with their safety.
Tom seemed to consider this and glanced down at Sonic. The hedgehog gave him a look that essentially said,
If you make me sit in a booster seat like a baby, I will make it my sole mission in life to make your life miserable.
The man eventually rolled his eyes and heaved a sigh.
Fine.
He said, and Sonic breathed a sigh of relief next to him.
Let's get out of here before we spend more money.
The hole in the back of the house made it easier to get the beds inside. Knuckles did most of the lifting, leaving Tom and Maddie feeling both shocked and a little nervous. They knew he was strong, but seeing this not even 4-foot kid lift a bed by himself and haul it upstairs. Once everything was inside, Maddie insisted on the boys getting showers. Tails went first, and Maddie helped get him thoroughly shampooed and rinsed. Knuckles was next, but it was more of a challenge getting him in. He insisted he could wash in the stream a mile away, but quickly changed his mind once they showed him the definition of hot shower. He stayed in until the water ran cold, much to Sonic's frustration. Once the hedgehog was done with the fastest shower of his life, seriously, the water was freezing. He wandered out of the bathroom, towel drying himself as well as possible. Spinning himself dry had been banned after the first disastrous attempt all those months ago. Water and loose blue fur had gone everywhere. He blinked at the silence. The downstairs was empty. Ozzy was still at Wade's, but the rest of the family were nowhere to be seen.
Hey, where is everyone?
He called. No answer. He wandered to the stairs and looked up. Sounds floated down to him. Water, a hairdryer, bits of conversation he couldn't make out. The knot in his chest tightened. He felt like that little hedgehog from before, the one who spent his life hiding, the one who hovered outside homes, listening to life and happiness, but never a part of it, the one who was all alone. Because right now, standing in the dim downstairs of 55 Plymouth Drive, with the tarps covering the large hole in the wall flapping softly in the evening breeze behind him, he felt those uncomfortably familiar feelings crawl back. The loneliness, the sadness, the longing, like it clicked its tongue at him.
They only moved upstairs to get the others settled in while you were shoring. You don't exactly need an audience to shore. There have been plenty of other nights when Tom and Maddie were off doing their own thing while you did something else. It's not a big deal. Stop blowing it out of proportion.
He furrowed his brow. That made perfect sense. Was everyone supposed to just stick around downstairs while he shored? He wasn't the center of the universe. There was stuff to be done, and it was best to make use of the time before it got too late. Still, fear nibbled at his mind, and, normally, when Tom and Maddie did their thing, it felt like a commercial break, like at any moment one of them would be back, talking to him, including him in something, making him feel a part of things. It didn't feel like he was excluded, like they had something more important to do than deal with him. He flashed back to when he first came to stay here, how scared he was, how nervous he was, how utterly terrified he was that he'd say or do the wrong thing and they'd kick him out. He looked back up the stairs, listened to the water, the warmth up there. It sounded normal, natural, like those other two boys had always been here, and felt like they belonged. Already, it hadn't even been 2 days yet. Emotions swirled inside him, and he felt goosebumps crawl up and down his arms, sadness, jealousy, fear, loneliness. But it took him a few seconds to identify the main one, the one that made his stomach clench and guilt surge. Anger. He was angry, but at whom? He couldn't really say. At Tails and Knuckles for daring to feel so comfortable and welcome in his home when it had taken Sonic weeks, months to do so. At Tom and Maddie for daring to accept the boys so quickly and caring about them so much. At himself for feeling these selfish, negative emotions in the first place when this whole setup had been his idea to begin with. He didn't know. Maybe none of them, and there was something else that ate him and he refused to see it. Maybe a little of all of them. He just didn't know. It wasn't fair. They sounded so happy. Did any of them even notice he wasn't there? Did any of them care at all? As if on cue, the hairdryer cut off and he heard Maddie's voice as it neared the top of the stairs.
You were the one who insisted you could put it together.
She was saying, throwing a look over her shoulder as she descended the stairs.
I don't want to hear it. I'm gonna see what's taking Blue so long.
Turning back, she noticed Sonic at the base of the stairs. Her smile brightened.
Hey, there's my boy.
Despite the swirl of negativity he had been caught in, Sonic felt a real smile curve his lips.
Think I nearly became a hobsicle in that shower.
The woman gave him an exaggerated pout.
No, baby. I'll talk to Knuckles about that, and next time, you get first dibs.
She nodded her head back toward the attic opening.
I've got the hairdryer out and ready to get the damp out of your fur. I just finished drying Tails and you have to see him. He looks like a big golden cotton ball. It's hilarious and adorable at the same time.
She turned and climbed back toward the attic. Sonic hesitated for a second, the last of his negative thoughts dissolving in his mind. The knot in his chest loosened. He was being stupid. Tom and Maddie loved him, and having Tails and Knuckles here didn't change that. He was simply acting like a spoiled brat who wasn't getting all the attention anymore. Sonic let out a deep breath and climbed the stairs. 2 hours later and everyone was settled in for the night. After a quick brushing, Tails had unfluffed enough so that he could help with the assembly of his bed. Much to Tom's relief and embarrassment, the fox had understood the instructions immediately, correcting the mistakes the man had made while attempting the assembly himself. Knuckles had retreated to the corner of the attic nearest the stairs. He claimed it provided the best location for an ambush, should an intruder arrive during the night. The bare mattress he chose to sleep on lay on the attic floor, and he had refused any other decorations or accessories. Maddie left him a pillow and blanket anyway, just in case he should decide he wanted them later in the night. Sonic had seemed a little off when he first entered the attic, but soon returned to his normal, chatterboxy self after some hairdryer attention. Maddie ran the dryer, pumping her fingers through the thick wool spikes on his head to ensure they dried thoroughly. This was something the hedgehog would never admit to loving, even though the feeling of her fingers through his fur was incredibly relaxing. It had taken some time to get all 3 boys settled enough to be tucked in, but soon soft snores flooded down from the attic. Now the adults settled in and readied themselves to turn in for the night. Tom sat at the end of the bed, watching his wife wrap her hair in a scarf.
I think Sonic's middle child syndrome is starting to rear its ugly head.
Maddie turned to look at him, an eyebrow caught.
Already.
He nodded.
You seem kind of off at Sam's. I think the reality of the situation is starting to hit him.
His wife uttered a small sigh as she slid into bed and pulled the covers over her legs.
He did have a bit of a dark cloud over him at the clinic today. I thought it was just because of the whole don't wanna be here thing.
Are the others doing fine?
She shrugged.
Hard to tell, since I don't know what's normal for either of them. Knuckles is still being very well behaved, and I can't tell if it's because of his warriorness or because he's nervous about being here. Tails is being pretty non-decisive.
Tom gave her a questioning look. She gave another shrug.
I don't know how to explain it. It's like he doesn't want to say what he wants. He just refers to Sonic for everything. Whatever Sonic wants is fine with me. He's really latched onto Blue.
The sheriff nodded.
I noticed that. Sonic was his first real friend ever, so it makes sense.
Right, I get that. But I don't want him to feel like he's just Sonic's little sidekick. I want him to feel comfortable by himself.
Tom moved up to sit on the side of the bed nearest his wife.
I know, baby, but it's still something. Let's give them some time to adjust. Once they're more comfortable with us, we'll be able to offer more help.
She nodded, then raised her eyebrows as though a thought occurred to her.
Hey, speaking of, did you see that commander today?
Yes, I did actually.
He said, rubbing a hand across the back of his neck. Maddie gave him a look.
I take it there's no help coming.
Nope, he's sending people over tomorrow morning to get us fixed up.
Maddie lifted an eyebrow.
Then there's something else you're not telling me. What's up?
He sighed and moved over to his bedside table to pull an envelope from the top drawer. What?
He gave me the paperwork for our guardianship for the boys.
She eyed the packet in his hand.
That's not much. Is that bad?
Tom took a deep breath.
It essentially boils down to us taking care of the boys until
He sighed.
Until the government requires their help with any threats they can't deal with.
Maddie sat still for a few seconds, her brow furrowed. Then she shook her head slowly at first. then harder as her anger grew.
No, absolutely not. Heck no, that is not gonna happen over my dead body.
Maddie.
Tom said, holding his free hand out in a calming gesture. She shushed him with a look.
Don't you Maddie me.
She said, and there was fire in her eyes.
They're kids, Tom. They've already been through so much in their lives. There is absolutely no way I'm gonna agree to let the government just come in and use them as little super soldiers whenever they see fit. No.
I said things.
Tom said, keeping his voice calm and soothing. He expected her to be upset. She had every right to be upset, but anger wasn't going to solve anything.
But he said the decision would be his, and he would do everything in his power to make sure it was the last resort.
And you trust him?
No, I don't trust him.
Tom said, climbing onto the bed and folding one leg beneath him.
His whole livelihood is keeping secrets, but I believe him. He seemed sincere when he said he would protect them.
She uttered an annoyed sigh, rubbing her face with her hands.
I don't like it.
Neither do I.
I don't want to feel like we're on edge again, like we were with Sonic, just waiting for the government to show up and take him away.
Neither do I.
Uttering a tired sigh, Maddie tilted her head back and rested it against the wall behind her.
What if we don't sign it?
Tom shrugged.
Then live on edge again, waiting for government to show up and take them away.
He paused, his voice softer.
To be put and prodded in a lab somewhere, whatever where they think is necessary.
She lifted her head quickly.
Wait, lab.
Walter said some of his higher-ups would do that if given the chance. This paperwork is something that is supposed to keep them at bay.
He held the packet up.
I know, like this and more, this may be the only we can keep them safe for as long as we can.
Maddie stared at the packet, glared at it. More accurately, Tom knew exactly how she felt. He just wanted to keep these boys safe, give them a home, a family, help them have fun and just be kids, despite the trauma they had faced in the past. But reality, as is often the case, seemed much more complicated than that.
Well, I won't let the government take them,
she said, her voice soft.
I don't know if any of them have any rings left, but if it came down to it, I'd throw on myself and take them away. I will not let those bows be used as weapons in a fight they didn't choose.
Tom snuggled up next to her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders.
And I would be right there with you, stepping through that ring.
He picked up the packet.
The way I see it, this acts as a bit of a security blanket. As long as Walter says this, he can run interference between us and the bigger boys above him. Like I said, I believe he wants to protect them. You just need to have a little faith.
Faith,
she said, cocking an eyebrow at him.
In the same organization that catfished my sister into a sham wedding, that tasered Sonic and locked him and Tails in cages like they were some kind of wild animals, that once had Robotnik on the payroll. Not a great track record, is it? But I'm supposed to have faith they'll do right by those boys.
Tom leaned forward and kissed her forehead.
Do trust me.
Don't.
She shook her head.
Don't pull that. This is wrong. You can't tell me you don't feel it too. It's like making a deal with the devil.
Of course it's wrong.
Tom said, his calm ebbing into frustration.
Let the devil know.
He's still a devil.
Maddie.
Tom, I love you, and yes, I do trust you.
She said, taking his face into her hands.
But I don't trust them.
He nodded, covering her hands with his.
That's fair, I don't trust them either.
I want to talk to Walters.
Tom opened his mouth to say something, when she covered it with her hand.
I promise I'll be calm and rational. I just want to clarify a few things.
He sighed, nodding.
I suppose that's fair. Then both talk to him tomorrow together.
She nodded.
Right, and I promise to keep my temper in check.
She paused.
Or at least try to.
He cocked an eyebrow.
out into the house to make sure you're unarmed.
She giggled, moving the packet to her nightstand and wrapping her arms around his neck.
You could frisk me now, Sheriff, just to make sure.
Well, now,
He said, flicking off his lamp.
I suppose I must in the interest of public safety and all that.
They kissed, pulling the covers up over them. It had been a mighty stressful couple of days, and it was nice being just the two of them right now.